She didn't scream, didn't cry, didn't beg to stay. She simply shut the trunk and drove away, taking with her the most precious thing he had. But behind that silent departure wasn't just a typical breakup or a domestic fight. It was the beginning of a carefully orchestrated plan to erase him from his own daughter's life. His service, his past, even his silence, all of it would be turned into weapons against him. But there was one thing they hadn't accounted for. A 6-year-old girl can carry the truth too. Sometimes the smallest voice can tear lies apart. This isn't a war, nor a drama. It's a battle without bullets, where the prize isn't just custody, but a child's soul. And only the one willing to remain in the shadows can step into the light at the right moment and say what truly matters. Hello, my friend. I'm so glad you stopped by my channel. If you're here for the first time, don't forget to subscribe and share this video with your friends or family. It really helps my channel a lot. Please tell me in which city or country you watched this video. I value every one of your comments. So let's get started. The bitter scent of engine oil still lingered on Miles's flannel as he pulled into the driveway, nearly 3 hours earlier than anyone expected. Travis had offered to handle closing duties at the garage when Miles mentioned the persistent throbbing behind his eyes that had started around noon. But the moment he spotted the house, something felt wrong. Tessa's silver Accord was parked askew, trunk yawning open like a wound. The instincts he'd long buried after leaving the service stirred within him, dulled by time, but far from gone. A tight unease crept through him as he pushed open the front door. The scene inside wasn't simply disordered. It looked like someone had turned the place upside down in haste. Not the usual scatter of family life, but the frantic debris of a rushed escape. A suitcase sat precariously on the stairs, bulging and only partially zipped. Above, voices rang out, Tessa's, sharp and brittle. I said grab your favorite, not every toy you've ever owned. There's not enough space. Then came Sophie's voice, quiet and trembling. But Daddy gave me this one. Leave it. Tessa's answer was like a slap. I'm not saying it again. Miles didn't recall crossing the living room. The stairs were a blur under his feet. He found them in Sophie's bedroom. His daughter's cheeks were stained with tears, while Tessa's face was taut with anger. The floor was scattered with tossed clothes and neglected toys. Sophie clutched a worn-out stuffed rabbit like it was her only anchor. What's going on? Miles asked, his voice calm and controlled, the same tone he used during missions that had gone sideways. Tessa spun toward him, startled, her expression flickering from shock to steely resolve. You're home early. He looked to Sophie, who brightened when she saw him, her eyes wide with hope. Hey, baby girl, can you give Mommy and Daddy a minute? She's not going anywhere, Tessa said, stepping between them like a wall. This isn't up for discussion. I think it should be. Miles took another step into the room. You're packing. Where are you planning to take her? She's our daughter, Tessa snapped, eyes flashing. And I'm taking her away from this. Her arm swept across the room, not at the clutter, but at something deeper, a life she no longer wanted any part of. Tessa, Miles said, his tone measured, whatever's happening, we can talk it through. Just not in front of Sophie. There's nothing left to talk about, she bit out, yanking the suitcase shut with force. I've already decided we're leaving. Just like that? His pulse pounded in his ears, though his voice stayed even. No warning, no conversation. She let out a cold laugh. When do we ever talk? You come home, grunt a few words, play with Sophie for 10 minutes, and then you disappear inside your own head. I've been present, he said, quietly but firmly. For both of you. Physically, maybe. But the man who came back from deployment isn't the one who left. You left a part of yourself over there, the part that could love, that could connect. I've been living with a ghost. He didn't argue. Where are you going? To my brother's. Then, somewhere you can't find us. She squared her shoulders. Caleb has connections. He's going to help me fight for custody. You're not taking her. The words were steady, final. Not a threat, but a vow. Tessa's gaze darkened. Really? What are you going to do? Drag us back? Show the court exactly what I've been telling them about you? Miles didn't flinch. Sophie, I love you, always. That's never going to change. Her voice wavered. Daddy. That's enough. Tessa cut in, gripping the suitcase in one hand and Sophie's arm in the other. We're leaving. Don't try to stop us, unless you want to prove me right. As she brushed past him, Miles reached out and caught her elbow, not roughly, just enough to pause her step. This isn't finished. Tessa gave him a frosty smile. It was over a long time ago. You just didn't notice. He followed them downstairs, not to block their path, not to escalate, but to commit every moment to memory. The clunk of the trunk closing, the ignition catching, tires crunching on the gravel drive. Miles stood motionless as they pulled away. No shouting, no begging, no desperate attempts to change her mind. That would only confirm what Tessa wanted people to believe, that he was unstable, volatile. So he stood silent in the drive, rooted like stone as the car turned the corner and vanished. A cold, hollow ache spread through him. She had taken his little girl. But this wasn't the end. It didn't take long, just 1 week, for Miles's world to completely fall apart. The letter came in the morning, tucked between discount circulars and past-due bills. Plain, government-marked, lifeless. A warning dressed in official language. Miles stood motionless at the edge of the driveway, Oregon's persistent rain soaking through every layer. The chill didn't register. Tessa wasn't just seeking custody, she wanted it all. No middle ground, no visitation, just full removal, as though he weren't simply inadequate, but dangerous. Word's been getting around, Travis said quietly over their break at the garage. Deep creases formed on his tired face. People are talking, Miles. So let 'em, Miles replied, barely above a whisper. It's bad, man. They're saying stuff you can't come back from. Like what? That you didn't return whole. That whatever happened overseas left you broken, unsafe, especially around kids. Miles's jaw tightened, eyes narrowing. Who's spreading that? Travis didn't answer outright. His silence confirmed enough. Started with Tessa's circle, those women she reads books with. Her brother's been pushing stories around the courthouse, too. He paused again, hesitant. Then there was that barbecue, 4th of July. The fireworks. Miles finished, his voice like gravel. That single moment from 2 summers prior had haunted him since. Unexpected fireworks had triggered a full-blown panic, sending him to the ground in Jonas Traeger's backyard, gasping for air, eyes darting like prey. Only Sophie's tiny palm pressed against his cheek had calmed him. After finishing his shift, Miles stopped by the grocery store. Mrs. Holloway, once always cheerful, barely acknowledged him. Down the produce aisle, 2 women murmured behind their hands, stealing glances that mixed suspicion with pity. His fists clenched unconsciously. He'd made it through 3 combat deployments. This kind of civilian judgment didn't scare him. But at the checkout lane, Kara Dempsey, an old schoolmate of Tessa's, greeted him with a look meant to wound. You got something to say, Kara? He asked, low and calm. She smacked his groceries across the scanner. Knew something was off with you. Tessa never fit in here and you dragged her under. She finally came to her senses. That hit hard, but the real blow came later. Near closing time, a police cruiser pulled into the garage. Liam Cortez stepped out, not as a friend, but like a harbinger. Once they'd been brothers in arms. Now the air between them was foreign. Liam, Miles said, wiping his hands on a rag. What's this about? Liam didn't relax. I'm coming to you unofficially, because of our past. Tessa filed a complaint. Miles's stomach dropped. What kind? She's accusing you of emotional instability. Says your outbursts are getting worse. Claims she's scared for Sophie. Liam's voice was steady, professional. Now that she's filed, they'll open an inquiry. You'll get the formal notice tomorrow. Miles stood still, rag limp in his hands. You think there's any truth to it? Liam hesitated. That flicker of the old bond was still there. Doesn't matter what I think. It's in writing now. And her brother's close with the DA. They're setting the stage. For what? I've never laid a hand on them. Never would. They're not saying you have. It's about your head, man. PTSD's easy to spin, especially in front of a judge who's never worn a uniform. That betrayal cut deeper than any of Tessa's accusations. It wasn't her words that stung. It was the system twisting his service into ammunition to take his daughter. What do I do now? He asked, the question tasting foreign in his mouth. Liam looked toward the exit. Lawyer up, fast, and watch your step. They're waiting for a reason. After closing shop, Miles drove home to a house that no longer felt like his. In Sophie's room, everything remained untouched. Her toys and books sitting exactly where she'd left them, suspended in time. He'd weathered ambushes before. Survival meant keeping quiet, planning carefully, and knowing when to act. He took out his phone and made the call. Julia, it's me. I need a hand. His sister didn't miss a beat. Her voice came sharp and sure. I heard. That woman's out for blood. What do you need? Eyes on the ground, someone I trust, and maybe a fallback plan if this gets worse. You've got both. No questions. Miles let out the breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. There's one more thing, he added. I need a lawyer who won't blink at the name Caleb Brighton. The visitation room stank of bleach and stale coffee. Miles sat ramrod straight on a molded plastic chair designed to punish anyone foolish enough to sit in it. 2 weeks had dragged by since he last saw Sophie. 14 endless days. The court had allowed him limited visits, 1 hour each week, supervised, while the custody case simmered. By his attorney's standards, it was a small victory, considering the heavy accusations Tessa had thrown at him. The door moaned open, and there she was. Sophie, her tiny hand engulfed by a social worker Miles barely remembered. Jillian, he thought. Daddy, she cried, her face lighting up. She wriggled free of Jillian's grasp and sprinted to him. Miles swooped her up mid-charge, hugging her so tightly he almost forgot himself. She felt lighter in his arms, as though she had shed something invisible during their time apart. Hey, Peanut, he said, his voice hoarse with feeling. I missed you so much. Jillian stayed nearby, clutching her clipboard like a shield, her gaze never wavering. Miles ignored her completely, lowering Sophie gently to the ground, his whole being focused on her. I missed you too, Sophie whispered, so quietly he had to lean in. Can we go home now? The words tore into him like a blade. Not today, sweetheart, he said, his voice soft. But we get to be together for a whole hour. That's okay, she said with a small, brave smile. An hour's still good, right? They huddled together over a sketchbook she had tucked under her arm. Miles let Sophie lead, drawing whatever she pleased. She sketched their house, complete with the massive oak tree that ruled their backyard. Mom doesn't let me draw much anymore, Sophie murmured, glancing around nervously. She says I should read instead. Miles kept his face neutral, though a hot anger stirred deep inside him. Drawing was Sophie's way of making sense of the world. Taking it from her was cruel. She's different now, Sophie whispered even lower, leaning close. She gets mad a lot. She makes me practice things I have to say. Miles froze mid-stroke. Practice? He repeated, careful to keep his tone light. Sophie darted a look at Jillian, then quickly went back to her drawing. She says if someone asks me about you, I should say you're scary. A slow, cold rage settled in Miles's chest, but he forced his features to stay kind, his voice calm. And what do you tell them? he asked gently. I say what she wants, Sophie admitted. Then she leaned in, so close he could feel her breath against his ear. But I remember the real stuff. You never scared me, not even when you had those nightmares. Miles's throat ached. Somehow, he kept his voice steady. Sophie, you should always tell the truth when you can, but I understand if it's hard. Just remember this. I love you. Always. That will never change. When Jillian announced that time was up, Sophie clung to him fiercely, her arms locked around his neck. Don't leave, she pleaded, her voice muffled against his shirt. I'm not going far, baby, he promised, gently loosening her grip. I'll be right here next week. As Jillian led her away, Sophie turned for one final glance. Daddy, she called, louder now, steadier. I remember the truth. The door clicked shut behind her, leaving Miles alone in the harsh fluorescent light, her words echoing in his mind. I remember the truth. No child should have to carry such a burden. No child should be forced to navigate the lies of grown-ups. As he stepped outside into the cold, leaden afternoon of an Oregon spring, something inside Miles hardened. If Tessa wanted a battle of stories, she would get one. But she had overlooked the most important fact. Sophie's voice was her own, and Miles would fight to make sure she could use it. The county courthouse towered before him, a fortress of stone and rules. Adjusting his tie, Miles caught the eye of his attorney, Marissa Connell. Young, razor-sharp, and utterly fearless, she had no history with Caleb Brighton, and no reason to fear him. Remember, she said under her breath as they neared the courtroom, let me speak for you, no matter what they throw. Inside, Tessa was already seated at the front with her team, Caleb Brighton at the center, flanked by two sharp-suited associates. Tessa wore a tasteful blue dress, her hair pinned back neatly, her makeup understated. She exuded maternal concern like a perfume, carefully measured, meticulously applied. Caleb locked eyes with Miles, wearing a thin smile that barely masked his contempt. He had never approved of Miles, and now he looked certain he would finally be rid of him. Judge Diana Knowles entered briskly, and the hearing began. As Marissa had warned, it was mostly procedural, setting deadlines, reviewing filings, laying the groundwork for the real custody trial ahead. Then Caleb stood, buttoning his jacket with a practiced flourish. Your Honor, he began smoothly, while we recognize the court's thoroughness, my client remains deeply concerned about the impact these visitations are having on the minor child. Judge Knowles barely blinked. The guardian ad litem's report suggests the visits have been beneficial, Mr. Brighton, she said coolly. Do you have any fresh evidence? We do, Your Honor. Caleb nodded toward an associate, who hurried forward with a folder. This, Caleb said, his voice rich with false concern, is a sworn statement from Dr. Aaron Patton, Sophie's new pediatrician. She noticed unmistakable signs of anxiety and emotional strain directly linked to the custody arrangement. That pattern repeated itself throughout the entire case. Caleb skillfully spun a story casting Miles as unstable, dangerous, and untrustworthy, a volatile former soldier with a troubled past and flashes of rage. Every allegation was crafted to imply danger without ever directly accusing him of abuse, a careful maneuver that left Miles few avenues for direct defense. When Tessa finally took the stand, her testimony was nearly flawless. Her eyes shimmered with unshed tears, her voice trembling ever so slightly as she spoke about her growing fears for Sophie's well-being. She described Miles withdrawing into himself during episodes, becoming someone she barely recognized. He loves Sophie, she conceded, a deliberate, strategic gesture. But she added that love, by itself, couldn't heal what was broken inside him. All I want is for her to feel safe, to be secure, she said. Miles kept his features rigid, even as sorrow and rage battled within him. He caught Judge Knowles studying him intently, looking for the slightest crack in his facade that might lend credence to Tessa's portrayal. He showed none. Later that evening, Miles sat at Julia's kitchen table, dinner dishes shoved to the side. Although the diner had been closed for some time, the lingering scent of grilled onions and coffee filled the air. "You should have seen her," he muttered, absently spinning his coffee cup. "Acting like I'm a ticking time bomb." Julia snorted. That woman couldn't fake her way through a grade school recital. Now she's supposed to be Meryl Streep. "She's convincing enough," Miles replied flatly. "Caleb's got people half thinking I'm tomorrow's tragic headline." Julia leaned in, eyes sharp. "Then we make damn sure they don't stay convinced. What's your lawyer say about bringing in character witnesses?" "She's working on it," Miles said. "But meanwhile, Tessa's trotting out doctors and so-called specialists who've never even met me, painting me like I'm some clinical case study." He ran a hand down his face. "And I can't deny it. PTSD's on my record. It's real." Julia gave a solemn nod. "Doesn't mean you're dangerous. A lot of good men came back from the sandbox carrying that weight." "Maybe so," Miles said, his gaze locked on the swirling coffee. "But they're using it against me." He exhaled slowly. "I need to figure out what Tessa's endgame really is. This campaign against me, it doesn't feel like it's just her idea. We've got to play this smart," he added after a moment. "If Caleb realizes we're digging, then let him," Julia snapped, her voice fierce. "That pompous blowhard thinks he runs this town. He forgets the Langleys have been here longer than the Brackenridges. Our influence is quieter, but it's real." "One more thing," Miles said, reaching for his jacket. "I need you to listen for anything about Tessa, who she's been around lately, if there's someone new." Because Miles Larkson knew better than anyone how to keep moving when the odds were against him. But this fight wasn't just about survival anymore. This was about protecting his daughter. As twilight settled, Miles's workshop was bathed in a warm, golden glow. The rhythmic rasp of sandpaper smoothing wood filled the space. The rocking chair he was building for Sophie's birthday was finally starting to resemble the vision he'd had long before everything fell apart. The door creaked open, and Liam stepped inside, still in uniform, but relaxed enough to show this wasn't an official visit. "Been a while," Liam said, nodding toward the half-finished chair. Without glancing up, Miles answered, "Didn't think we were exactly friends anymore." "I still do my job, Miles," Liam replied calmly. "But I haven't forgotten who dragged me out of that hellhole in Kandahar." He closed the door softly behind him. "I came to give you a heads up. Off the record. There's been talk around the station about Tessa." He hesitated. "She's been seen with some guy. Real estate guy from Portland. Doesn't look like a new acquaintance, if you know what I mean." The unspoken implication lingered in the air. Miles absorbed it with a quiet, icy calm. "How long's it been going on?" he asked. "No clue," Liam said. "But they're not hiding it anymore." He hesitated. "There's more. Caleb's been having private meetings with them, a lot of them. Tessa always said Caleb had ambitions bigger than this town. He's planning a run for state senate next year." Liam rubbed the back of his neck uneasily. "And this guy, Rourke, he's got real money. Political connections up in Portland." "So Caleb gets his campaign funded," Miles said darkly. "What's Tessa getting, besides a wealthy boyfriend?" "No idea," Liam admitted. "But the whole thing stinks of something bigger." Miles walked over to a small fridge in the corner, grabbed 2 beers, and tossed one to Liam. A silent gesture of peace. "When did you meet her?" Liam asked after a beat. "Never heard that story." 5 years ago, Miles said. "Julia dragged me to a fundraiser for the Veterans Center." Liam nodded. "Yeah, I remember. You looked miserable." "I was." Miles took a long drink, memories stirring like smoke from an old fire. Then she walked in, champagne in hand, smiling like the sun breaking through a storm. I thought it was real. Back then, I believed it. He found himself questioning the very foundation of his relationship with Tessa. Had anything about her ever been real? She'd been so involved in the fundraiser, claiming her brother was part of the event board. She'd shown an interest in his military background, but it wasn't out of curiosity, more like the kind of pity that civilians often displayed. It didn't take long before they were married. 6 months later, Miles found himself staring into his beer, the weight of the past heavy on his mind. At the time, everything had felt like the right decision. Tessa seemed eager to settle, to start a family, and that was something he could get behind. Sophie arrived the next year. Liam sat in silence, letting the pause stretch out before speaking. When did things begin to change? Miles mulled over the question, letting the slow unraveling of his marriage take shape in his thoughts. It wasn't a single moment that marked the shift. It was more like the mask slowly began to peel away. The woman he had married had been drawn to the idea of a peaceful life, coupled with a local hero. But reality painted a different picture. "What do you mean different?" Liam asked. Miles's voice was distant as he answered, "Dull. Suffocating." He hadn't been able to give her the life she dreamed of, the social circles, the status she wanted. Tessa had gravitated toward Caleb's crowd, and every time she returned, she seemed further away, more disappointed. "Still," Liam said after a beat, "she stayed, for years." "She said it was for Sophie," Miles replied, his voice heavy, placing the empty bottle onto the bench. Lately, he'd wondered if Tessa had simply been biding her time, waiting for the right moment to walk away. And now this Rourke character could be that moment. Miles shifted uneasily, restless. Or perhaps Rourke was just a piece of a bigger puzzle. Tessa never made a move without some personal benefit in mind. The thought hung in the air, sharp and unresolved. Liam observed him intently. "Even marrying you?" That question hit harder than Miles cared to admit. "I've been asking myself the same thing." "For what it's worth," Liam said, finishing his beer, "I never understood what you saw in her." Miles offered a shadow of a smile. "She was captivating, beautiful. She made me feel like I mattered, like I wasn't broken." He paused, the weight of the moment sinking in. Or maybe I was just tired of the noise in my own head. Liam nodded, understanding without needing further words. "And Sophie? How does she fit into all this?" "That's the part that doesn't make sense. If Tessa's moving on to a better life, why not leave Sophie with me? It would make everything simpler." "Maybe she's a symbol," Liam suggested. "Or leverage." "Leverage against me?" Miles scoffed. "There's nothing left for her to take." Liam hesitated, his voice lowering. "Maybe it's not about what she wants from you. Maybe it's about what she doesn't want you to have." That idea settled over Miles like a cold weight, slow and suffocating. Tessa knew how much Sophie meant to him. She was his anchor, his purpose, his joy. Taking her wouldn't be about gaining anything. It would be about hurting him. Punishment. Liam glanced at his watch. "I should head out." "This conversation stays between us," Miles said firmly. The call came at 2:37 a.m., pulling Miles from an uneasy sleep. Larkson's auto flashed across the caller ID. His voice was rough from sleep. Calls from the shop at this hour were never good. "Miles." "It's Liam," the deputy's voice was blunt. "All business. There's been an incident. Your shop's been broken into. Vandalism. You need to come down." 20 minutes later, Miles arrived at the shop, now illuminated by the harsh flash of red and blue lights. The front window was shattered, glass scattered like ice across the lot. Liam met him by the crime scene tape. "Brace yourself," he muttered. Inside, Miles froze. The office was in chaos, desks upended, monitors smashed, papers strewn across the floor. But the garage was worse. Tools scattered, expensive equipment destroyed beyond repair. And on the back wall, in crude red spray paint, the words, "Miles's blood ran cold." He had never harmed civilians during his tours. In fact, he had risked his life countless times to protect them. But this wasn't about his past. This was an attempt to paint him as a threat, not to strangers, but to Sophie. "Security footage?" he asked, his voice tight. "Cut before they came in," Liam replied. "Clean job? Any witnesses? We're checking with neighbors, but nothing solid yet." Liam lowered his voice. "The sheriff wants to see you in the morning, officially." "About what?" Miles asked, though he already had an idea. "Insurance," Liam said carefully. "Your policy, upgraded 3 weeks ago. Higher coverage on tools and property." The weight of the message hit Miles like a punch to the gut. He let out a bitter laugh. "You think I did this? For the payout?" Liam's expression remained neutral. "I don't. But the timing, with everything going on, the custody stuff, it'll raise questions." Miles rubbed his jaw, the pieces beginning to fall into place. Someone was plotting against him. By the time the police had wrapped up their investigation at the scene, the first light of dawn had begun to color the sky. Miles stood amidst the debris of his business, mentally sorting through what might still be usable and what was beyond repair. The financial setback was significant, but it was secondary. This attack had targeted his reputation, his integrity, and his ability to provide for Sophie. His phone vibrated in his pocket, a message from an unknown number. "Saw a fancy car parked by your place around midnight. Thought you'd want to know. Jared Kentley." It took Miles a moment to place the name. Jared Kentley, the teenager who worked weekends pumping gas at the Shell station just a few blocks away. Without responding, Miles tucked the phone back into his pocket. Not now, not with people still watching. Liam, the last officer to leave, paused by the door. "You got another place to go? This spot's not safe anymore." "I'll figure something out." Liam gave a short nod and added, his voice low, "Be careful, Mayor. This wasn't just bad luck." Once the scene was cleared, Miles retrieved his phone and reread Jared's message. A fancy car at that time of night. It was the kind of detail that most people would dismiss, especially coming from a kid. But if you paid attention, it meant something. He dialed Julia's number. "I need another favor," he said when she picked up. "There's a kid, Jared Kentley. Works at the Shell on Main, right?" "Exactly. Can you talk to him? Keep it casual. Find out what he saw around my place last night. I can't approach him myself. It would look suspicious." Julia didn't hesitate. "Got it. You staying visible?" Because sometimes the best way to set a second trap was to make your enemy believe the first one had already done the job. The motel was basic and unremarkable, but at least it was clean. Miles sat on the bed, turning one of Sophie's old stuffed animals in his hands, a bear he had retrieved from the house. It was one of the few toys she had been forbidden to bring with her. Its worn fur and mismatched button eyes showed how deeply it had been loved. It was exactly what he needed. A knock on the door broke his concentration. Julia stood in the doorway, holding a takeout bag from her diner and a small shopping sack. "Got what you asked for," she said, stepping past him without waiting for an invitation. "Still think you're being a bit dramatic, though. It's not paranoia if someone really is after you." Miles opened the shopping bag, revealing a small voice recorder no bigger than a thumb drive, along with extra batteries. Julia set the food on the table by the window. "Jared confirmed what he texted," she said. "He saw a dark sedan, looked like a luxury car. Thought it might have been a Mercedes, though he wasn't sure." Miles's head snapped up. "Did he recognize the driver?" Julia's expression was serious. "Caleb Brighton. The kid was certain. He said the guy stiffed him on a tip once after he cleaned his windshield. That stuck with him." Miles picked up the bear and gently slit the back open, creating a small pocket in the stuffing. He slid the recorder inside and began sewing it back up with careful, deliberate stitches. "Sophie's got another visit tomorrow," he murmured, his focus on his work. "She's getting her bear back, with a little upgrade. Julia raised an eyebrow. You're bugging your daughter? I'm giving her a safe way to speak. He tied off the thread and trimmed it neatly. Tessa's coaching her. She's under pressure. This lets Sophie speak on her own terms. And if Tessa finds it, she won't, he added quickly. Sophie knows how to hide things. She's had to. His voice softened. She's been carrying secrets for weeks. Julia leaned back, watching him test the recorder. This even legal? Probably not, he said calmly, meeting her gaze. Does it change anything for you? Not a bit, she replied, just trying to figure out how much bail's gonna cost. Later that night, Miles sat alone, staring at the bear resting on the desk. The recorder inside was tiny and had limited memory. It needed to be used sparingly, activated only when absolutely necessary, during the moments that truly mattered. It was a risk. If it was discovered, it could easily be twisted into proof of guilt or manipulation. But he couldn't stop thinking about what Sophie had told him during their last visit. I remember the truth. She was carrying a burden no child should ever have to bear, the realization that the adults around her were lying and that she was expected to play along. The bear would offer her a chance to speak freely, a space where Tessa couldn't alter her words. Meanwhile, across town, the diner buzzed with the usual Saturday crowd. Julia moved seamlessly through the diner, her steps almost automatic, honed by years of experience. Her smile was polite, yet her eyes remained sharply aware of her surroundings. Miles occupied a quiet corner booth, a cup of coffee cooling beside him and a newspaper unfurled in front of him, though it remained unread. His position gave him an unobstructed view of the entrance and the street outside. Precisely at noon, a silver Accord glided to the curb. Tessa stepped out of the car, immaculate in designer jeans and a luxurious cashmere sweater. She opened the back door, and Sophie climbed out, clutching Mr. Buttons, the teddy bear Miles had returned to her at their last supervised visit. Tessa bent down to speak with her daughter, her face strained, then glanced at her watch. The action was unmistakable. Hurry up, we're running late. Sophie nodded briefly and walked toward the door, her posture straight with a familiar determination. Miles lowered his head slightly as the bell over the door jingled. He had chosen his spot with care, close enough for Julia to notice, but concealed from the door by a tall, leafy plant. With exaggerated cheer, Julia greeted the girl. Well, look who's here. My favorite guest. Your booth's ready, sweetheart. The following hour passed at a painful crawl. Miles sipped his coffee, ordered a meal he had no appetite for, and occasionally turned a page of the newspaper that wasn't truly being read. All the while, his attention was fixed on his daughter across the room. Every so often, Julia came by to refill his coffee, offering quiet updates on Sophie's progress. Eventually, Sophie finished the last bite of the chocolate sundae she always ordered. Julia slid into Miles's booth with practiced ease. It's done, she whispered. She wrote the letter herself. I just helped with the spelling. Miles's heart started to race. Where is it? It's in her backpack. She knows to keep it hidden, only to give it to the judge if... Julia's voice trailed off as the door chime sounded again. Tessa appeared in the doorway, scanning the room, her irritation clear. Julia quickly straightened up, subtly shifting to shield Miles from view. I'll be right with you, ma'am, she called out, then murmured to Miles, Go, now, out the back. Miles left a tip on the table, slipped behind the counter, and made his way to the kitchen. He exited through the rear door. Through the small window in the swinging door, he caught one last glance. Sophie packing up her things, carefully placing Mr. Buttons into her backpack, right next to the concealed letter. Later that evening, Miles sat at the edge of his motel bed, his phone in hand. On the screen was a single audio file sent from the hidden recorder inside Mr. Buttons, uploaded to a secure cloud account he had set up. His thumb hovered over the play button, uncertainty gnawing at him. Was this the right thing to do? Was he betraying his daughter's trust by turning her into an unknowing informant? No. He shook his head. This wasn't about surveillance. This was about protecting her, giving Sophie a voice in a world where adults always seemed to talk over her. He tapped the play button. At first, all he heard was the sound of shifting fabric. Then, her voice, soft but unmistakable. "It's me, Sophie. Daddy, if you're listening." I did what Aunt Julia told me. I wrote the letter for the judge. I hid it in my special box. Mommy never checks there. There was a pause, followed by more rustling sounds. Mommy got mad today. At lunch, she called twice to see if I was still with Aunt Julia. She doesn't like her. Says she's a bad example. Sophie's voice dropped, barely above a whisper now. I heard Mommy talking to Uncle Caleb last night. I wasn't supposed to be near his office, but I needed Mr. Buttons, and the door was open a little. They were talking about your store, Daddy. They said it was unfortunate, but necessary. Then they laughed. Miles's grip on the phone tightened. Uncle Caleb mentioned Portland. He said it would be easier after they cut ties completely. I think they meant you. I think they want to take me far away. Her voice faltered, fear evident, but there was defiance there too. I don't want to go. I told them that in my letter. I hope the judge listens. I want to stay with you, Daddy. She hesitated before continuing. Mommy's not the same anymore. Sometimes. She's scary. Suddenly, a door creaked in the background, followed by Tessa's sharp voice. Sophie, who are you talking to? Just Mr. Buttons, Sophie replied too quickly. We're playing. Well, it's bath time. Put your toys away and come on. The recording ended. Miles sat frozen, the phone clenched in his hand as his mind reeled. Portland, cutting ties, moving on. The pieces of the puzzle clicked into place. This wasn't just about a custody battle. It wasn't about Tessa's relationship with Caleb. It wasn't even about politics. This was about erasing him from Sophie's life entirely, making him disappear so completely that even court-ordered visitations would become impossible. The recent attack on his store? It wasn't random. It was part of a deliberate plan to destabilize him, both financially and emotionally. To ensure he couldn't continue the legal fight or follow if they decided to leave. Miles stared at the ceiling, Sophie's voice echoing in his thoughts. I'm not going, I wrote to him. Tessa's defiant stance stirred something complicated in Miles, part pride, part fear. She was far too young to be pulled into such a grueling conflict, and far too young to be fighting this hard just to have her voice heard. The courtroom felt chillier than Miles remembered. The air conditioning battled the sweltering June heat outside, pumping out cold air with unyielding persistence. He adjusted the collar of the tie he had borrowed from Liam, just like the suit, and worked to steady his racing heart. Seated next to him at the defense table, Marissa Connell flipped through her notes for the last time, calm and composed. Across the aisle, Caleb's legal team had grown to 4 sharply dressed professionals, their tailored suits and confident air casting a formidable shadow over Miles's lone defense. Wait them out, Marissa whispered, without lifting her eyes. Let them make the first move. Miles gave a subtle nod, his gaze fixed on the entrance where Tessa would soon arrive. They hadn't seen each other since the preliminary hearing 6 weeks ago. Since then, his shop had been broken into, his reputation tarnished, and his finances pushed to the brink. As expected, the side door swung open. Tessa stepped in with Caleb at her side, presenting a united front of poised affluence and moral indignation. Her gray dress was simple, yet unmistakably expensive, the perfect choice for a mother casting herself as the defender of a child from a dangerous man. The bailiff called the court to order, and Judge Diana Knowles entered. Known for her integrity and her commitment to the welfare of children, she was one of the few remaining sources of hope Miles had. This is the final custody hearing in the case of Larkson versus Larkson, she began, her voice sharp and commanding. Let me remind all parties that our sole concern here is the child's well-being. Not egos, not revenge, not comfort, just the child. Caleb stood with smooth precision, adjusting his jacket with the ease of long practice. Your Honor, he began, this case concerns the safety of a child, safety that has been threatened by an unstable home environment caused by the father's untreated PTSD and a pattern of increasingly troubling behavior. He spoke with precision, painting Miles as a fragile ex-soldier falling apart at home. Caleb's narrative was polished, crafted from selective moments, misread reactions, and hand-picked witnesses who'd only seen Miles during his lowest points. When Marissa rose to speak, her tone was calm and deliberate. No dramatics, no emotional outbursts, just the facts. Yes, Your Honor, this is indeed about safety, she began. Safety for a child who lived in a stable home for 6 years until her mother suddenly removed her. A mother who had never raised concerns about Mr. Larkson's parenting or mental health before. This same child has since been kept away from her father, manipulated, and caught in the middle of a power struggle that should never have involved her. The morning unfolded exactly as Miles had anticipated. One by one, Tessa's witnesses took the stand, each presenting accounts that seemed well rehearsed, each story painting Miles as unstable. These weren't outright lies, not exactly, just pieces of a narrative strung together without context, crafted to deceive. Connor Blackwell, the court-appointed child psychologist, provided the most balanced perspective of the day. The child is articulate and intelligent for her age, he explained, but she's clearly under emotional strain. She shows anxiety when her home life is mentioned and becomes withdrawn when discussing her parents. Did she say she was afraid of her father? Caleb asked. Blackwell paused, thoughtful. Not in those words, no. In fact, she spoke about him with warmth. Couldn't that be a coping mechanism? It's possible, Blackwell conceded. Or it could be genuine. Children's emotional realities are rarely simple, particularly in strained family situations. Then came Tessa's testimony. She took the stand with the poise of someone thoroughly prepared. Her demeanor was impeccable, marred only by the occasional tremble in her hands, just enough to seem authentic, though Miles couldn't shake the suspicion that even that had been rehearsed. I did everything I could to keep our family together, she said, her voice wavering at just the right moment. Miles, he can be a wonderful father when he's himself. But the war left scars. Sometimes he just disappears mentally. And Sophie, she'd see that emptiness in his eyes. It scared her. It confused her. As the court prepared to adjourn for the day, Caleb stood once more, now with a new revelation. Before we close for today, Your Honor, he said, I need to inform the court of a recent development. My client has been offered a significant career opportunity in Portland. This will require a move. We will be amending our custody petition to include permission for relocation. The opportunity offers an improved quality of life and better educational options for the child. The words struck Miles like a blow. Portland was nearly 4 hours away, far enough to make regular visitation nearly impossible, especially given his precarious financial situation and the near collapse of his business. Judge Knowles's brow furrowed. That's a significant change, Mr. Brighton. You should have filed this amendment sooner so the other party had time to prepare. The offer was only finalized recently, Your Honor, Caleb responded. We'll submit all supporting documents by tomorrow morning. The judge didn't hide her frustration but gave a brief nod. Make sure it's done. We'll reconvene tomorrow at 9 a.m. As Miles rose to leave, he caught Tessa's gaze from across the courtroom. She held his stare for a moment, calm, unreadable. Her expression blended satisfaction with cautious awareness. She didn't fear him physically, not now and not ever, but she saw him as a potential threat, a disruption to the narrative she had so carefully built. And Miles thought, good. Let her feel the unease. Because by tomorrow the truth wouldn't be softened or rehearsed. It would be delivered straight from Sophie. Her voice, her words, her reality, and Miles would be there, waiting. The courtroom doors opened and Judge Knowles entered, her robe settling around her with commanding quiet. She took her seat. "Good morning. Before we continue with the testimony, I would like to address the motion regarding relocation," she announced. Turning toward the opposing attorney, she asked, "Mr. Brighton, have you submitted the necessary documents?" Caleb rose gracefully from his chair. "Yes, Your Honor," he replied. "We've provided the job offer from Rourke Development Corporation to Mrs. Larkson, along with the information on the schools available to Sophie in Portland." When it was their turn to call witnesses, Marissa stood and called Liam to the stand first. Though clearly uneasy about testifying against the brother of a fellow officer, Liam answered each question with integrity. He spoke of Miles's character, their long-standing friendship, and his dedication as a father. "Miles and I served together," Liam began. In his uniform, his voice firm and respectful, Liam continued, "I've witnessed Miles handle situations that would break most people. In high-pressure, dire circumstances, he was the one who kept it together, the one who made the right call when it mattered." Other witnesses followed, each one reinforcing Miles's unwavering presence in Sophie's life, his gentle patience, and his quiet commitment. Through their testimony, Marissa carefully painted a portrait, not of an idealized man, but of a father who had faced adversity directly and chosen to grow rather than retreat. Finally, it was Miles's turn to take the stand. As he swore the oath, a surprising calmness settled over him. The months of turmoil, anxiety, anger, frustration seemed to vanish, leaving only focus and resolve. "Mr. Larkson," Marissa began, "can you describe your relationship with your daughter?" Miles didn't direct his gaze to the attorney, but looked straight at Judge Knowles. "Sophie is my world. Since the day she was born, I've done my best to be there for her, dependable and truthful, the father she deserves. I haven't been perfect. War left its marks on me. But I've never let those marks define how I show up for my daughter." Caleb's cross-examination was pointed, designed to provoke a response that would validate Tessa's accusations of volatility. Yet Miles remained composed, answering each question directly, refusing to fall into emotional traps. "Is it true," Caleb pressed, "that you were under investigation for insurance fraud after the vandalism at your store?" "Yes," Miles answered calmly. "The insurer conducted an investigation, and they found no evidence of fraud. My claim is currently being processed." "Isn't it suspicious," Caleb pressed, "that this happened right when your finances were stretched thin due to this custody battle?" Miles met Caleb's gaze without flinching. "Not more suspicious than your car being spotted near my store shortly after midnight on the night it was damaged." A murmur swept through the courtroom. Caleb's jaw tightened, his face darkening. "Objection," he barked. "That's an unfounded accusation." Marissa rose smoothly. "Your Honor, if Mr. Brighton intends to pursue this line of questioning, we are prepared to bring a witness to corroborate the statement." Judge Knowles's gaze shifted between the attorneys, her expression sharpening. "We'll put a pin in that for now. Any further questions for this witness, Mr. Brighton?" Caleb shot Miles one last seething look. "No more questions." As the final arguments drew to a close, Judge Knowles sat quietly, her expression thoughtful. "Before I make my decision," she said after a long pause, "I want to address the request to hear directly from the child. After reviewing Dr. Blackwell's report and the guardian ad litem's recommendation, I'm inclined to speak with Sophie privately, in chambers." A small voice interrupted the stillness. "Your Honor?" Heads turned as Sophie stood just inside the courtroom door, a social worker from Family Services behind her. She seemed uncertain, but determined. She wore a simple blue dress, her curls held back by a headband. One hand clutched a folded piece of paper, the other holding Mr. Buttons, her cherished toy. Judge Knowles raised an eyebrow. "Miss, I didn't realize you were scheduled to appear today. I told Miss Preston I had to come, Sophie said, her voice steady despite her age. There's something important I need to say. Tessa began to rise, but the judge interrupted her firmly. Mrs. Larkson, she said, cutting her off, before turning back to the child. Please, come forward. Sophie walked down the aisle, small but determined. When she reached the bench, she looked up with earnest eyes. I wrote a letter, she said, holding the paper up. Aunt Julia helped me with some of the words. I want to read it. Judge Knowles hesitated, then nodded once. Go ahead. Objection! Caleb shot up from his seat again, his voice harsh. This is completely irregular. It could cause emotional harm. We don't know who might have influenced. Mr. Brighton, Judge Knowles interrupted, her voice sharp. I will hear what the child has to say. Proceed, young lady. Sophie carefully unfolded the paper, taking a deep breath. The courtroom fell into silence, and her quiet, steady voice reverberated through the space. Dear Judge Knowles, my name is Sophie Elise Larkson, and I am 6 years old. I'm writing to you because the adults are making huge decisions about my life, but no one has asked me what I want. She paused, quickly glancing toward Miles, then Tessa, before continuing. My daddy makes me feel safe. Mommy tells me to say he's mean, but he's not. She says I have to say I'm scared of him, but that's not true. Even when he has bad dreams, he's never scared me. Tessa's face drained of color, and Caleb shifted uneasily in his seat. I don't like being at Uncle Caleb's house. It's really big, but it feels cold. Mommy gets mad when I say I want to see Daddy. She says we're moving to Portland soon, and that I'll forget him. But I won't forget. I just want to live with Daddy again. Sophie's voice grew steadier as she went on. I don't like Mommy's new boyfriend. He's at Uncle Caleb's house a lot. He acts nice when Mommy's around, but he's not. He scared our dog so much that it ran away. Mommy said the dog got lost, but I saw her friend kick him. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Miles clenched his fists under the table, anger building as he imagined Sophie witnessing such a thing. Please listen to me, she finished, looking directly at Judge Knowles. Adults think kids don't know what's happening, but we do. I know Mommy doesn't want to be with Daddy anymore. That's okay, but I still want to be with him. Please let me go home. That's all I needed to say. Thank you for listening. The room was silent after she finished. Judge Knowles studied Sophie for a long moment. Her gaze swept across the courtroom, pausing on Tessa's shocked expression and Miles's tightly controlled posture. Thank you, Sophie, she said finally. That was very brave. Sophie added quickly, her voice more urgent now. There's something else. She pulled Mr. Buttons from her backpack and continued. There's a recording in my bear, of Mommy yelling at me for wanting to see Daddy, and of her friend, the one who hurt our dog. I think you should hear it. The entire courtroom froze in stunned silence. For what felt like an eternity, no one spoke. Then, chaos erupted. Tessa leapt to her feet. What recording? Sophie, what are you saying? Caleb shouted objections. Marissa stood, demanding the recording be entered into evidence, while the social worker appeared utterly confused. Judge Knowles slammed her gavel down, the sound slicing through the uproar. Enough. Quiet. All of you. Her eyes fixed on Sophie, who stood firm and unshaken, clutching Mr. Buttons tightly. Young lady, the judge said carefully, what exactly are you telling me? There's a recorder in Mr. Buttons, Sophie explained calmly, despite the chaos. Daddy gave him back to me during our visit. I figured out how to use the recorder. I taped Mommy and her friend when they didn't know. This is outrageous, Caleb yelled. Mr. Brighton, Judge Knowles snapped coldly, control yourself or I will have you removed. Turning her attention to Miles, she asked sternly, Mr. Larkson, did you hide a recording device in your daughter's toy? Miles rose from his seat, meeting her gaze directly. Yes, Your Honor. Are you aware that recording someone without their consent may be illegal under Oregon law? I am, Miles replied. But I believed my daughter was in a situation where no one was listening to her. She was being coerced and manipulated. I wanted her to have a way to protect her truth when the adults around her were trying to silence it. The judge's expression remained firm, but there was a flicker of something softer in her eyes, perhaps understanding. I will listen to the recording, she declared, in my chambers. With counsel, present. Inside her private chambers, Judge Knowles took Mr. Buttons from Sophie, who pointed out the tiny recorder sewn into the bear's back. The court's IT technician carefully extracted the device and connected it to the judge's computer. Sophie, the judge asked gently, there are a few files on here. Which one do you think I should listen to? Sophie pointed to a file labeled with the date from 3 days ago. This one, she said. It's when Mommy's friend got really angry. Judge Knowles nodded to the technician who began playing the recording. At first, only the ambient sounds of a home could be heard. Then Sophie's voice came through. I miss Daddy. Can I call him? Tessa's voice followed, sharp and firm. No, you cannot call him. We've talked about this, Sophie. We're starting a new life. But I want to see him. I want to go home. This is your home now, Tessa snapped, her tone rising. Stop saying that. Your father… She stopped herself, her voice turning cold. He's not good for you right now. Why won't you believe me? Sophie's voice trembled with emotion. Because it's not the truth, came the reply, her composure hanging by a thread. You're lying. Daddy never did anything to hurt me. Never. A door creaked open, slicing through the tense atmosphere like a sharp knife. What's going on in here? A man's voice called out, smooth on the surface but carrying an unmistakable edge. Nothing, Mitchell, Tessa answered quickly, forcing a bright tone into her words. Sophie's just having a tough time. I want my daddy, Sophie said, her voice soft but firm. Listen, kid. Mitchell's tone darkened as he spoke. Your dad's not part of your life anymore. The sooner you accept that, the better for all of us. Your mother and I have a future together. He's not in it. You can't make me forget him, Sophie retorted sharply. A loud thud rang out, likely the sound of her hand slamming the table. You little… Mitchell growled, but Tessa quickly intervened. Mitchell, stop, she said, her voice strained. She's just a child, stubborn like her father. Mitchell's voice became cold as ice. Tessa, we've gone over this. If we want this to work, if Caleb's campaign is going to succeed, there can't be any lingering drama, no messy custody issues, no ex-husband lurking around. I get it. Tessa sighed, her voice heavy with stress. Moving to Portland will fix everything. Once we're settled there, the custody situation will be irrelevant. Your brother has the judge in his pocket, and your ex won't stand a chance, not after what happened with his garage. An uneasy silence filled the room. Then Tessa asked cautiously, What do you mean? What happened to his garage? Mitchell's laugh was dry, chilling. Let's just say I pulled a few strings, made sure he'd be too busy with insurance claims to put up a real legal fight. You did that? She asked, shocked. Caleb told me it was just a bad coincidence. He knew exactly what happened. It was his idea, actually. I just carried it out. You don't need the details, sweetheart. It's better that way. The recording continued for another minute, voices muffled before it fell silent. Judge Knowles paused the playback, her face hard as stone. Thank you for your bravery, Sophie, she said softly. Miss Preston will escort you out now so we can proceed. Once Sophie was escorted away, the judge turned to the attorneys in the room. It appears we have some serious concerns to address, including potential witness tampering and deliberate property damage. Caleb adjusted his tie, his usual composure faltering slightly. Your Honor, I had no part in any alleged vandalism. Mitchell Rourke is clearly fabricating stories to gain favor with Mrs. Larkson. So you completely deny involvement in the damage to Mr. Larkson's property? Judge Knowles asked sharply. Absolutely, Your Honor. And I assume Mrs. Larkson will also deny any knowledge of such actions? The judge continued, turning her attention to Tessa. All eyes shifted to Tessa, whose expression had shifted. Gone was the nervous, tearful woman, replaced by someone coldly calculating and composed. Mrs. Larkson, Judge Knowles said evenly, do you have anything to say about the recording we just heard? Tessa hesitated, then answered carefully. I had no prior knowledge of any plan to damage Miles's garage. If Mitchell did something, it was on his own. And I certainly never told Sophie to make up stories about her father. The recording suggests otherwise, the judge remarked. It's incomplete and taken out of context, Tessa countered quickly. My concerns about Miles's stability are genuine. Mrs. Larkson, Judge Knowles interjected firmly, be very careful with your next words. There's a huge difference between expressing legitimate concerns about your child's safety and orchestrating a false custody battle to further your brother's political ambitions and your own new domestic arrangement. The court reconvened, and Judge Knowles took her seat again, her face unyielding. In light of the evidence presented privately, I am issuing the following orders. Temporary sole custody of Sophie Larkson is granted to Miles Larkson, effective immediately. Mrs. Larkson will be allowed supervised visitation once a week, pending further review. Tessa let out a stifled cry as Caleb sat beside her, rigid and pale with shock. Additionally, the judge continued, this case will be referred to the district attorney's office for a full investigation into potential criminal actions, including property damage, insurance fraud, witness coaching, and perjury. Her gaze turned to Caleb, sharp as a blade. Mr. Brighton, as a legal professional, you should be particularly concerned about the seriousness of these accusations. Finally, her expression softened as she looked toward Sophie. You've shown great courage today, she said gently. It's never easy to speak the truth, especially when it's against adults you care about. With a swift motion, the judge struck her gavel, concluding the matter. This court is adjourned. Mr. Larkson, you may now take your daughter home. Without hesitation, Miles moved quickly to Sophie's side. She looked up at him, her eyes wide with uncertainty. Is it really over? She whispered. Can I come home now? Miles knelt before her, overcome with emotion. Yes, sweetheart, he said, his voice thick with emotion. You're coming home. Yes, darling. It's done. You're coming home. Sophie rushed into his arms, pressing her face against his chest. He embraced her, breathing in the familiar scent of her hair and feeling the soft, intense warmth of her presence. From above her, he noticed Tessa standing at a distance, her expression tangled with anger, sadness, and perhaps even envy. Their gazes met for a brief second before she quickly turned away, her movements sharp and frantic as she gathered her belongings. Miles didn't feel triumphant or smug, just thankful. The struggle had ended, and Sophie was heading back to where she belonged. That was the only thing that mattered now. Outside the courthouse, the summer sun bathed the stone steps in warmth. Journalists hovered on the periphery, drawn in by Caleb's political ambitions, which had turned the custody battle into a media spectacle. Miles stepped forward, Sophie's small hand in his, with Marissa following closely behind. The social worker had smoothly finalized the custody transfer. Judge Knowles's decision had been clear and unambiguous. Julia waited by the truck, her grin wide and filled with joy. There's my girl, she called out, her arms open. Sophie ran into them, diving into the hug, but their moment was interrupted by the sharp slam of the courthouse doors. Tessa stormed out, fury etched on her face, with Caleb trailing behind her. You think this is over? She screamed, moving toward Miles. You actually think you've won? Miles instinctively stepped in front of Sophie, shielding her. Tessa, not now, not here. You twisted everything, she shrieked. You poisoned her mind with your pathetic sob story. She turned to Caleb. Caleb, don't just stand there. Take her. Tessa. Enough, Caleb muttered, his voice low. The press is watching. She shoved him aside. I don't care. He ruined everything, everything we had planned, our future. Miles's voice was steady, low but firm, cutting through the rising tension. That's what this was really about, wasn't it? Not what's best for Sophie. Your future with Rourke. Caleb's campaign, he added. That's all you ever cared about. You never understood, she spat. You were content fixing cars and living your pathetic little life. I wanted more. I deserved more. Sophie deserved more too. She deserved honesty, Miles replied calmly, and to be treated like a person, not a pawn. Her face twisted with rage. Don't you dare lecture me about my daughter. You played the wounded veteran so well she actually believed it. I wanted you to be happy, Miles said softly, but not at Sophie's expense. Caleb stepped between them, his instincts as an attorney kicking in. Enough. This conversation ends now. Tessa, we're leaving. But she wasn't done. Her eyes flicked past Miles to where Sophie stood with Julia. Her tone softened, almost pleading. Sweetheart, she called out, you don't understand. Your daddy tricked you. He made you hide that recorder in your teddy bear. He used you. Sophie moved closer to Julia, her expression serious and composed. No, Mommy, she said quietly. You told me to lie. The words, spoken with the raw honesty of a child, struck with the force of a slap. Tessa flinched, the foundation of her carefully crafted narrative crumbling. You don't mean that, she whispered. You can't. Liam's voice broke through the heavy silence as he came down the stairs. Ms. Larkson, I think it's time for you to leave. Tessa spun around. She saw the gathering crowd, the reporters scribbling and snapping photos, capturing her unraveling in real time. She turned back to Miles, eyes blazing. This isn't over, she hissed. But the threat felt hollow, driven by desperation. It is over, Miles said quietly. For Sophie's sake, let it go. Caleb took her arm once more, and this time she didn't resist. Her shoulders slumped. For one brief moment, her anger dissipated, revealing a woman who had risked everything, her marriage, her child, her dignity, and lost it all. Miles turned back to Sophie, crouching to meet her gaze. Ready to go home, kiddo? She nodded, her face lighting up with a smile. Can we have pancakes for dinner? He let out a laugh, rough and unused, but genuine. Pancakes it is. Best idea I've heard all day. By the evening, the diner had closed. The neon sign flickered off, and the booths were empty. But the kitchen was still alive with the sounds of cooking, the warm glow of lights, the clatter of dishes, and the comforting smell of food. Julia at the griddle, flipping pancakes for Sophie, with crispy bacon, eggs, and everything else for their celebratory meal. She's going to be fine, Julia murmured, turning a pancake with expert ease. Kids bounce back. Miles's voice trembled with emotion. Yeah, I just wish she didn't have to. No, she didn't have the right. Julia's jaw clenched as she spoke. That's precisely why I brought something for you. Well, technically for you, but really it's for Liam. She ducked beneath the counter, emerging moments later with a sealed envelope in her hand. Do you remember Jared Kentley? The kid who saw Caleb's car parked outside your garage the night it got wrecked? Miles responded. I didn't just speak with him, Julia answered. I recorded our entire conversation, with his permission. She tapped the envelope gently. At first he was nervous, but once I explained what they were trying to pull on you and Sophie, he changed his mind. Turns out the kid's got some morals. You recorded it? Miles asked. A confident grin spread across Julia's face. Every single word, including the part where he talks about Caleb getting out of the car with someone who fits Mitchell Rourke's description. They walked into your shop carrying a duffel bag, and 20 minutes later, they left without it. The chime of the doorbell sounded above the diner, signaling Liam's entrance. He wore his officer's uniform, looking worn out. Sorry I'm late, he said, hanging his hat on the wall hook. Got tangled up with some interesting paperwork. He paused, noticing the serious expressions exchanged between Julia and Miles. What's going on? Julia pushed the envelope toward him. A little insurance, in case Caleb and his accomplice try to wiggle out of responsibility for what happened to Miles's shop. Liam took the envelope carefully, eyeing it with suspicion. "What's this?" "Jared Kentley's recorded statement," Julia explained. "He saw them, Liam, Caleb, and Rourke, on the night the garage was vandalized. They walked in carrying something, left empty-handed." Liam stared at the envelope for a moment, then turned to Miles. "This changes everything. Vandalism is one thing, but if this is true, it means conspiracy, intentional damage to disrupt a legal process. And if Rourke is connected to Caleb's campaign funds," Miles added, trailing off. "Then Caleb has far more to lose than just a custody battle," Liam concluded grimly. "And so does Tessa, if she knew anything about this." Even if she only learned about it after the fact and stayed silent, Liam continued. "That recording from Sophie's teddy bear suggests she knew and said nothing." Miles glanced over at Sophie, sitting in a booth nearby, quietly sketching with crayons, blissfully unaware of the serious conversation around her. "I don't want Sophie involved in this mess. She's already been through enough." "She might not have to be," Liam said. "With the audio from the bear and Kentley's testimony, we might be able to build a case without needing Sophie to testify." The soft, late-afternoon sunlight filtered through the trees, casting long shadows across the backyard. Miles was perched on a ladder, hammering the final nail into Sophie's treehouse. It was a simple structure, but sturdy, just a small platform with rails and an enclosed space, perfect for her to feel like she was in her own little fortress. A short ladder made it easy for Sophie to climb up by herself. "Is it ready yet?" Sophie called up from the ground, bouncing with excitement. "Almost," Miles called back, giving the railing one last tug to make sure everything was secure. "Just making sure everything's safe." He climbed down, turned to her, and adopted a serious tone. "All right, safety rules. Let's hear them." Sophie rolled her eyes but grinned. "No climbing when it's wet or dark. Always use both hands on the ladder. No pushing, no horseplay. And if I have friends over, an adult has to be nearby." Miles smiled, pleased. "Then, by the authority vested in me, I declare this treehouse officially open." The bell above the garage door jingled as it opened. Larkson's auto, freshly renovated, was back in business, thanks to the insurance payout and the town's support when the truth about the break-in came to light. It had taken 4 months, but the place looked better than it ever had. The visitor turned out to be Liam, now dressed casually, leaning against his personal truck. "Hey there, stranger," Miles greeted him. "Let me guess, your timing belt again?" Liam chuckled. "Nope, the truck's fine. I actually came by to deliver some news." His expression grew more serious. Rourke was sentenced this morning, 3 years. He could be out in a 1.5 years with parole. Not exactly justice, but his cooperation helped uncover some deeper corruption. "And Tessa?" Miles asked, already dreading the answer. "Probation." "Community service," Liam said. "The court viewed her as a minor player. Word is, she's planning to move to Seattle, starting fresh." Miles absorbed the news without much emotion. He remembered a time when hearing her name would have reopened old wounds. Now, it was just a quiet sadness, a sense of grief for something that had broken beyond repair. "She reached out, didn't she?" Liam asked softly, carefully, through her lawyer. "Mine got the call a few weeks ago," Miles answered, leaning against the frame of the garage. "She wants to talk about visitation after the holidays. Of course, it'd be supervised." "And how do you feel about that?" Liam asked. Miles's gaze drifted toward the yard, where Sophie was happily talking to herself from her new treehouse perch. "It doesn't really matter how I feel," he said quietly. "What matters is what's best for Sophie." Liam's voice broke the silence as he spoke, his words heavy with the weight of everything they had survived. "You did an outstanding job, Mayor. Through everything, You kept your eye on the things that mattered most. Miles let a small, knowing smile tug at the corners of his lips. I wasn't alone in this. His voice softened as he mentioned the others. You, Julia, Marissa, you all played your part. After a brief pause, he added, even Sophie. I've been fortunate. Seems like I've got an incredible team behind me. The evening wound down, and they were on their way back from Julia's diner. Sophie, nestled comfortably in the back seat, was relaxed, her eyelids drooping as contentment spread over her like a gentle, soothing blanket. Suddenly, in the stillness, her quiet voice broke through, asking a question that seemed to come from nowhere, yet carried deep curiosity. Dad, what if Mommy wants to come back? Miles turned his attention to the rearview mirror, where her sleepy reflection stared back at him. He considered his response, carefully choosing his words. If that happens, he said, we'll handle it, just like we always do, together. Sophie furrowed her brow slightly, deep in thought. But we don't go back, right? You said that before. His voice was firm, yet gentle, as he reaffirmed, that's right, we always move forward, no looking back. Satisfied, Sophie relaxed, closing her eyes once more, and within moments, she was asleep. The truck's cabin filled with the soft, steady rhythm of her breathing. As they crested the final hill before home, the last rays of the sun dipped beneath the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant hues of amber and gold. Miles stole a glance at her peaceful face, then turned his focus back to the road. From the back seat, a faint hum floated through the air, an old, familiar sound that Sophie had made in her sleep since infancy. The soft noise, barely louder than the hum of the engine, created an atmosphere of calm that seemed impenetrable, no matter the storm outside. They had been through so much, yet they were still standing, weathered but unbroken, resilient yet whole. And so they continued on their way, toward home, toward the unknown future, leaving behind the scars of their past while carrying with them the lessons they had learned. This story has come to an end. What's your opinion? Share it in the comments, my friend. And if you liked this story, check out other exciting videos on my channel. I'll say goodbye until the next video. See you.